The next award recipient is Chris Navarro. Chris's career covers more than 30 years, and his reputation has just grown and grown. He's become the preeminent bronze monument sculptor. His work can be seen in the Essence of Rex statue at Casper College, the Columbian Mammoth at the Washakie Museum and Heritage Center in Worland, and of course, many of you know the Lane Frost Bull and Rider statue at the Old West Museum in Cheyenne and many other places. Chris not only does this incredible art, he's raised funds for a variety of good causes, including the Casper Boys and Girls Club, the Nick Art Museum, the Central Wyoming Fair and Rodeo, and many others. Let's watch the video.
I created the large life-size T-Rex called Essence of Rex. It's at the Tate Museum.
And Chris drove him down from Cody, attached to the back of a flatbed trailer. My staff had the wonderful idea that we should enter the T-Rex in as a float in the parade.
He's like, well, I think I really like to ride it during the parade. It's like, I don't know how people are going to feel about that. I'm like, Chris, T-Rex riders don't ask permission. And he's like, you know what, you're right. I'm going to do it.
Right when our float was to take off, Chris put on his red CC rodeo vest and got up on top of him and rode him through the parade.
If you ever get a chance to ride a T-Rex down Main Street in your hometown, you got to take it up.
Of course, I was thinking liability, liability, liability.
That day was sure a lot of fun. I was out hunting one day with my roommate at the time. We stopped at Harry Jackson's studio. There was this beautiful sculpture. I used to ride bucking horses, and I thought, man, that is the most beautiful thing I ever seen. I asked the guy, I said, how much is that sculpture? And he said it was $35,000. And I was working in the oil field then, and I sure couldn't afford it. I drove my pickup truck over to the Natrona County Library, and I went to the librarian, and I asked her, I said, could you show me all the books you have on sculpting? I took all that stuff back home, and I did my first sculpture. It was a bull rider. It was called Spinning and Winning.
He has different shapes of different movement going in different directions, but there's also a sense of emotionality.
It is not some smooth, stylized horse. This is a horse with true muscle mass. Its mane is flying, tail is whipping, as he twists himself.
The work I have a passion and knowledge for, is Western art because I've been a horseman and a cowboy almost all my life. I think, being a rodeo cowboy was really good training for me. Rodeo is one of those jobs where you really don't know how much you're going to make, and it's kind of like art,
He really lives by cowboy code of do what you say you're going to do, make a deal by a handshake, and stick to it.
He's a man of his word. He's a man of action.
Well, I like to celebrate March 13th, 1986. That's the anniversary I quit my steady paycheck and I wanted to pursue my dream of being a professional sculptor. I remember my son JC, he was only 9 months old, and my wife Lynn was pregnant with our daughter Natalie. When there's times in your life when you just got to make a stand. If you really want something bad enough, you got to make the effort and be willing to take a risk, because in the end, it's not about how many years you live in this world, but what you leave behind. That's what really truly matters. Wow, thanks. It's a real honor to be here, and I kind of prepared a little something I wanted to say, but shoot, kind of wrote some things down, but I really don't want to, I'm not going to read from this thing, heck with it. I just like to speak from my heart a little bit, because, that's kind of how I got into art. I was, I tell people, rodeo is a good training for being a professional artist. A lot of people don't really grasp that, and I say, why? Because, to be a bull rider, you got to have a lot of confidence. You got to have some ignorance, and I think that's what it takes to make it in the art world. To be honest with you, if I would have known, how much foundry bills cost, and I don't know if I'd have become a bronze sculptor at the beginning, because, when I first started sculpting, I was 23 years old, and I didn't have a clue about how to do it. I just saw that bronze by Harry Jackson, that 2 champs, and I thought, man, that's the most beautiful thing I ever saw, and I wanted to own it. And when they told me how much it cost, I couldn't afford it. So I went down to Godek's the next day over, it's an art store in Casper on the 2nd Street, and John was there, and I says, I really don't know nothing about this bronze business, but I really want to get into it. And so he sold me a bunch of supplies, and The story, it's true. I loaded everything up and went over to the Natrona County Library, which is a great library, by the way. And I went over there and I asked the librarian to give me all the books. And I was living in a little 10 by 55 trailer out in the middle of nowhere. And I took all those things back. And the first thing I wanted to do was a sculpture of a bull rider, because that meant so much to me to do that, because I had a passion for it. And I think, being an artist, I really never thought too much about it. I think it's more about putting your hands in the materials and doing it. I try not to overthink everything, because a lot of times I take these big monument jobs and they say, yeah, you do a T-Rex with light coming out of it? Yeah, I can do that. And then I really don't think about it until I have to do it. And that's why I think, to have a little bit of ignorance is a good thing, because, the most important thing is you got to believe that you can do it. And I remember the day I quit my job. I had a job in the oil field because I quit riding bulls and broncs, and I felt like something was missing in my life, and that's when I took up art. And I remember the day I quit my job. I kind of celebrated because it was March 13th, 1986. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk to my wife about it. I didn't tell anybody. I just went and quit the job, and I drove home that day, and I says, I quit my job. I'm going to do art full time because, all I ever do is part-time art. That's all I'm ever going to be, is a part-time artist. And I said, I just know I can make it. And not my mom or my best friend or even the guy that owned the foundry thought that was a good idea. But you know what? I know what it's like having a dream, and you're the only one that can see it. And I take a little bit of power into that. And so I began my career, like I said, ignorance and confidence. And then I came to, the first big public monument I ever did was for Lane Frost here at Cheyenne Frontier Days. I did that sculpture in 1993, and I came to the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo Committee, and I gave them this great idea about doing this sculpture. And, they turned me down at first. And I said, really? I said, well, we're putting this big wing up onto the stands, and we don't have the people to help do the fundraising. And I said, well, you know what? I'll do the fundraising myself. And then my wife said, you promised them that? And I said, yeah. So I just thought if I had a belief in it that it could happen. And sure enough, it did. And I was able to finish that sculpture. And, right when I started working on it, my dad died, and I was kind of knocked down by that. And then it burned up in a fire March of 93. And I had to have it delivered in July, so I had to redo the sculpture. And it seemed like every time I was about to start feeling good about this project, something come around and knocked me down. But you know what? I stuck with it. And I believe that's the biggest part of being an artist, because you're going to get knocked down. Everybody gets knocked down in life. It's about getting up and getting back on and finishing it. And you know what? And that ability is available to everybody. And a lot of people think, I don't have this kind of talent but talent can grow and knowledge can grow. Because when you look at my first pieces, I look at them now and I kind of cringe, but because I've gotten better and I should get better. Because how you get better is by actually spending the time and the effort in doing it. It's not that complicated. I try not to overthink things too much because I just want to do them. And I've been fortunate, I've been able to make a living as a full-time sculptor now for over 30 years in Wyoming. And I must have over 20 monuments here in Wyoming, and it's real proud to have them here. And I hope I can put another 20 up. So I want to thank everybody for being here and getting this award. And all you artists out there, I hope there's an artist out there somewhere that walks up to one of my sculptures like when I walked up to Harry Jackson's sculpture. Because if I wouldn't have seen that sculpture, I don't think my life would have taken this road and this journey. And it's that one little spark. I got to talk to Harry later, but he wasn't even there when I met him, I just saw that piece of sculpture, and it just lit a spark in me. And I'm hoping that someday there's some young man or some young woman walks up to one of my works, and that spark is lit in them. Thank you.
Chris Navarro.